stupid black girl," the man sneered in Arabic, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Zara froze, champagne dripping down her uniform. The crystal glasses lay shattered at her feet, victims of the prince's deliberately extended foot. His entourage erupted in laughter. The restaurant dimmed to background noise. "She doesn't even realize I tripped her," the prince continued in Arabic, gold-ringed fingers gesturing dismissively. "Americans send their most incompetent to serve royalty." Zara's hands shook as she knelt to collect razor-sharp shards, her reflection fragmented across each piece. Dark skin, pressed uniform, eyes blazing with controlled fury. "Look at her, completely clueless." The prince smirked to his associates. "I could insult her family and she'd still smile for tips." Blood purled on Zara's fingertip as she gripped a glass shard too tightly. She raised her eyes directly to the prince's, something dangerous flickering in her gaze. The Azure Lounge crowned the 51st floor of Dubai's Grand Millennium Hotel, a realm of understated opulence where the ultra-wealthy dined beneath hand-blown glass chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's glittering skyline, each tower competing to touch the clouds. Staff moved with practiced precision across Italian marble floors, their black uniforms a deliberate contrast to the cream and gold decor. Every detail signaled exclusivity. The crystal stemware imported from Vienna, the gold-rimmed plates, the custom chairs upholstered in silk. The maître d', Mr. Karim, patrolled the dining room with the vigilance of a general. His silver-flecked beard and tailored suit projected authority as he ensured each table maintained the required atmosphere of privileged tranquility. "Standards must never slip," he reminded staff during pre-shift meetings. "Our guests pay for perfection." Tonight, the restaurant hummed with the discreet commerce of influence, murmured business negotiations, political connections cemented over vintage wines, marriage arrangements discussed between families. Money was never mentioned directly, yet it underscored every interaction. Regular patrons understood the unwritten rules. No photographs, discreet conversation, and absolute deference from staff. The Azure's reputation rested on its ability to make the powerful feel untouchable. In one corner, tech entrepreneurs shared blueprints for the next digital revolution. In another, European diplomats whispered secrets behind menu covers. Near the piano, fashion royalty critiqued upcoming collections over truffle-infused delicacies. But tonight, all eyes occasionally drifted to the central table, a rounded booth where Prince Faisal bin Rahim and his entourage had been seated. Their laughter, a touch too loud for the Azure's refined ambiance, created ripples of subtle disapproval across the restaurant. Zara Jordan hadn't planned on working at the Azure. 6 months ago, she'd been researching her doctoral thesis on cultural crossroads, language as power in modern Middle Eastern diplomacy at Columbia University. When her funding was unexpectedly cut, the prestigious waitress position at Dubai's most exclusive restaurant had seemed the perfect solution. Immersion in the culture she studied while earning enough to continue her research. At 28, Zara already spoke 5 languages fluently. Arabic had been her first linguistic love, sparked by childhood neighbors in Brooklyn, a Lebanese family who treated her like their own daughter. By 16, she'd mastered modern standard Arabic. During undergrad at Georgetown, she'd refined her skills in 4 major dialects, earning a reputation as a linguistic prodigy. Her professors hadn't understood her decision to pause academic life for service work. "You're wasting your talent," her advisor had warned during their last video call. "With your skills, you could be interpreting for diplomats, not serving them dinner." What they didn't understand was that Zara was still researching, observing how language revealed true character, when speakers believe themselves unheard. Her notebook filled nightly with observations on how the wealthy and powerful spoke differently when they thought service staff couldn't understand. In her tiny studio apartment, 20 minutes from the hotel by metro, Arabic poetry books lined the walls. Voice memos of dialectical variations played as she slept. Flashcards with obscure cultural references littered her desk. This wasn't just academic pursuit, it was passion. Zara kept her linguistic abilities secret at work, presenting herself as a typical American expatriate, still struggling with basic Arabic phrases. The deliberate mispronunciations and confused smiles had become a carefully constructed mask. Sometimes you learn more by listening than speaking, her Lebanese neighbor Mrs. Khalil had taught her. When people think you don't understand, they reveal who they truly are. Tonight, as she changed into a fresh uniform after the champagne incident, Zara wondered how much longer she could maintain the charade. Prince Faisal bin Rahim arrived at precisely 8:30 p.m., flanked by 4 associates. His entrance rippled through the Azure, staff straightening, guests pretending not to notice while watching from peripheral vision. At 35, the prince commanded attention through birthright and bearing. His custom suit, subtle cologne, and meticulously trimmed beard projected calculated sophistication. A master's degree from Oxford added intellectual credibility to his family's billions. American tabloids had once crowned him the Middle East's most eligible royal. Behind the camera-ready smile lay shrewd eyes that categorized everyone as either useful or irrelevant. Mr. Karim had called an emergency staff meeting just before their arrival. The prince's family owns 3 hotel chains competing with ours, he'd explained, voice tense. Regional expansion plans for our brand depend on tonight's impression. One complaint could cost millions. The prince's companions represented a strategic collection of influence. Omar al-Hakim, aging energy magnate whose handshake sealed billion-dollar deals. Twin brothers Tariq and Salim Nasser, technology investors expanding into American markets, and Rami Khoury, the prince's Oxford roommate, now serving as his chief advisor. They settled into the restaurant's premier booth, a curved alcove offering both privacy and visibility. Other diners pretended not to notice while angling for better views. Champagne immediately, Mr. Karim instructed staff. Krug Clos d'Ambonnet, 2006. The prince enjoys being acknowledged without being approached directly. The senior servers suddenly discovered urgent tasks elsewhere in the restaurant, leaving Zara, still considered junior despite her exemplary performance, assigned to the royal table. "Don't speak unless spoken to," Mr. Karim whispered as he escorted her toward the booth. "And for God's sake, don't spill anything." Zara approached the prince's table with practiced poise, balancing the tray of open Krug with the precision of a tightrope walker. The $4,000 bottle gleamed under recessed lighting as she positioned herself at the correct angle, present but unobtrusive, visible yet invisible. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said in carefully accented English. "Welcome to the Azure. May I pour your champagne?" Prince Faisal barely glanced up, flicking his fingers in affirmation without pausing his conversation with Rami. His signet ring caught the light, an ancient family crest etched in gold. As Zara filled each flute with practiced efficiency, Omar al-Hakim studied her name tag. "Zara," he pronounced slowly. "American." "Yes, sir." She smiled politely, maintaining the expected eye contact duration, brief enough to show respect, long enough to demonstrate attention. "How long have you been in Dubai?" He continued, his English crisp from decades of international business. Before she could answer, Prince Faisal interrupted in Arabic. "Why bother asking? These people rotate through like disposable napkins. One black American waitress is the same as the next. Zara's hand remained steady as she finished pouring, her expression unchanged despite understanding every syllable. We'll begin with the caviar selection. Rami instructed her in English, sliding the leather-bound menu aside without opening it. And the chef should prepare his signature lamb. The prince doesn't waste time with menus. Zara nodded. Excellent choices. Our beluga reserve is particularly exceptional tonight. As she turned to leave, Prince Faisal muttered to his companions in Arabic. At least they trained her to recommend the most expensive items. Perhaps not completely worthless after all. Subtle laughter followed her as she retreated toward the kitchen, her back straight, her steps measured. From across the restaurant, Mr. Karim watched anxiously, his fingers unconsciously adjusting his already perfect tie. Inside the kitchen's controlled chaos, Zara paused, took a single deep breath, then relayed the order to the executive chef with professional detachment, as if she hadn't just been reduced to a profitable commodity in a language she'd studied for 15 years. The caviar service provided the prince's first opportunity for targeted disdain. As Zara arranged the mother-of-pearl spoons and crystal bowls with traditional accompaniments, Prince Faisal shifted to Gulf Arabic dialect, presumably adding another layer of privacy. Americans have no understanding of true luxury, he commented to Tariq Nasser while watching Zara prepare the service. Look how she handles the caviar, like feeding slop to animals. Zara continued her preparations, carefully measuring the perfect portion of the $800 per ounce delicacy. Her hands moved with deliberate grace, having practiced this presentation countless times. The last time I was in New York, the prince continued, sampling the caviar. I witnessed how they treat their own black citizens, and yet they lecture us about equality. The men nodded in agreement, comfortable in their assumed linguistic privacy. This one is probably working here because nowhere in America would hire her, Salim added, eyes flicking over Zara's form as she arranged delicate blinnies on the plate. Though I suppose she has certain physical attributes that must help. A fresh wave of laughter rippled through the group. Rami, the advisor, contributed. My cousin manages a hotel in London. Says American staff are the worst, especially the minorities. No respect for hierarchy. Zara's expression remained neutral, focused on the perfect presentation. Inside, her mind cataloged each comment with academic precision, noting dialectical variations, cultural prejudices, and status signaling behaviors. This was research material no textbook could provide. Out there, girl. Prince Faisal switched to English, snapping his fingers. This champagne is getting warm. Bring fresh bottles immediately. Of course, sir. Right away. Zara's American accent was flawless, her subservience apparent. As she walked away, the prince reverted to Arabic. Watch how long it takes. I bet she gets confused and brings the wrong vintage. Omar, the oldest of the group, seemed less comfortable with the targeted mockery. The service here is generally excellent, he noted, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin. Excellence is relative, the prince replied. When standards are low enough, mediocrity appears exceptional. From the service station, Zara monitored their champagne levels while arranging the replacement bottle in an ice bucket. Mr. Karim appeared at her side, anxiety evident in his lowered voice. Is everything satisfactory? The prince's satisfaction is absolutely critical. They seem to be enjoying themselves, Zara answered diplomatically. Good, good. He adjusted his cuffs nervously. Remember, the Azure's reputation rests on tonight's service. What neither of them said aloud was that Zara's job likely depended on it too. The lamb arrived pink-centered and fragrant with za'atar and sumac, a masterpiece of modern Middle Eastern cuisine. Zara presented each plate with sommelier-paired wines, describing the dishes in carefully simplified English. Lamb with herbs and special sauce, she explained, deliberately understating the complex preparation. Prince Faisal smirked at his companions. How would you say this in Arabic? He asked Zara in English, his tone suggesting a trap. I'm sorry, sir. I only know simple Arabic words, she replied with practiced hesitation. Shukran, marhaba, the basics. The prince turned to his associates, switching to Arabic. As expected, they sent us cultural ignorance on legs. This dish is lam bil za'atar wa sumak, prepared in the traditional method of my grandmother's region, and she reduces it to lamb with herbs. Perhaps we should teach her, Rami suggested with mock generosity, then addressed Zara in English. Say lamdan? Lamdan? Zara repeated, intentionally flattening the guttural consonants. The table erupted in laughter at her manufactured mispronunciation. Again, Prince Faisal commanded, phone now recording. Say Za'atar. Za'atar. She stumbled deliberately, watching his phone capture her orchestrated humiliation. This will be amusing to share, he commented in Arabic. American cultural imperialism personified. They expect the world to speak English while remaining willfully ignorant themselves. The wine pairing provided fresh ammunition. When Zara described the Syrah's flavor profile, Prince Faisal interrupted. You're pronouncing it incorrectly, he stated coldly in English. It's not Shiraz, as Americans say. Show some respect for French tradition. I apologize, sir, Zara responded, though her pronunciation had been perfect. The prince's behavior emboldened his companions. They began making special requests, dishes modified beyond recognition, wine temperatures precisely specified, seating arrangements adjusted repeatedly. Each command delivered with the expectation of failure. With each return to the table, Zara felt the microscope intensify. Mr. Karim hovered nearby, his anxiety palpable as he witnessed the escalating demands. Whatever they want, he whispered urgently when she passed. The hotel director is now monitoring the situation personally. The kitchen's controlled chaos had transformed to tense precision. Executive chef Laurent, whose 3 Michelin stars usually guaranteed deference, now personally inspected each dish destined for the prince's table. Everything must be beyond perfect, he instructed, flame briefly illuminating his face as he caramelized the dessert's sugar crust. The hotel director called down. This table has corporate implications. Zara entered through the swinging doors, shoulders squared despite the mounting pressure. Behind her professional composure, fatigue pulled at her muscles. The prince's table had now consumed hours of increasingly elaborate service. They've requested the black truffle soufflé, she informed the pastry station. But Prince Faisal wants it less airy than usual, because Americans overcook them. Chef Laurent's knuckles whitened around his ladle. The soufflé is perfectly balanced. It cannot be less airy and remain a soufflé. I understand, Zara replied quietly. But they're insistent. From across the kitchen, Dante, a server with 3 years' seniority, watched the exchange. I requested a section change when I saw them seated in mine. He admitted to Zara as she collected warm towels. Prince Faisal made my cousin cry when she served him in London. He's notorious. Most of the waitstaff suddenly needed breaks when they arrived, agreed Leela, arranging petits fours. You're handling it remarkably well. The kitchen's solidarity provided momentary comfort. Even Chef Laurent, after his initial resistance, placed a perfected truffle soufflé on her tray. You have dignity, Zara, he said uncharacteristically gentle. Some guests try to take that from staff. Don't let them. Mr. Karim pushed through the door, tension visible in his jaw. The Nassers are asking for you specifically now. Apparently, the prince finds your service entertaining. The kitchen fell silent. staff exchanging knowing glances. "We've all experienced tables like this," Lila whispered, adjusting the towels on Zara's tray. "But you're stronger than most." As Zara prepared to return to the dining room, Chef Laurent added a small, exquisite chocolate, not ordered, not on the menu, to her tray. "A reminder," he said quietly. "We see your worth, even when guests do not." Hours into service, the prince's table had consumed 4 bottles of reserve wine, sent back 2 perfectly prepared dishes, and created an invisible force field that other diners carefully navigated around. Their laughter had grown progressively louder, their demands increasingly arbitrary. Zara approached with coffee service, single-origin Ethiopian beans prepared tableside in traditional jabina pots, her movements precise despite mounting exhaustion. "Your coffee, gentlemen," she announced, arranging the ornate copper vessels. Prince Faisal glanced at the presentation, then deliberately shifted his elbow. The movement sent his water glass toppling, liquid cascading across the table and onto his lap. His reaction was immediate and theatrical. "What incompetence!" he shouted in English, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. "You've ruined my suit!" Zara stepped back, apologizing professionally despite having been nowhere near the glass when it fell. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. Let me bring towels immediately." The restaurant froze. Mr. Karim materialized instantly, profuse apologies flowing as he signaled frantically for assistance. As staff rushed to address the manufactured crisis, Prince Faisal switched to Arabic, voice lowered but perfectly audible to Zara. "This is what happens when you hire people based on diversity quotas rather than competence," he told his companions, dabbing at barely damp trousers. "An educated person, someone with actual intelligence, would never make such mistakes." His associates nodded in practiced agreement. "Americans export their failed social experiments everywhere," he continued, hiring unqualified minorities, then wondering why service suffers. Omar, who had remained mostly silent during the escalating behavior, frowned slightly. Perhaps it was an accident. "These things happen." "No," Prince Faisal responded sharply. "Incompetence happens when you place people in positions beyond their intellectual capacity." This girl probably struggles to follow basic instructions in her native language, let alone understand proper service. The words hung in the air as Zara returned with linen towels. She placed them on the table with steady hands, though something had shifted in her demeanor. A barely perceptible straightening of her spine, a momentary pause in her automatic deference. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice controlled. The prince's cold smile suggested he sensed the change. "We'll see." A heavy silence descended over the table as Zara carefully blotted the remaining moisture. The other servers had retreated, leaving her alone at the epicenter of tension. Feet away, Mr. Karim hovered anxiously, phone pressed to his ear, undoubtedly briefing hotel management about the incident. Prince Faisal leaned back, examining Zara with the detached curiosity of someone studying an insect under glass. His companions watched expectantly, attuned to his mood shifts from years of proximity to power. "Tell me," he said in English, voice pitched to carry to nearby tables, "do they really let anyone become a server in America these days? No standards at all." The question hung in the air, a public challenge designed to humiliate. Other diners glanced over, then quickly away, unwilling to witness someone else's degradation. In that crystallized moment, something shifted behind Zara's eyes. 15 years of language study, a doctoral thesis nearly complete, research that could transform understanding of cultural diplomacy. And here she was, being deliberately diminished by a man who assumed her silence meant ignorance. Mrs. Khalil's voice echoed in her memory. Your knowledge is armor they cannot penetrate. Your education is power they cannot take. Zara completed drying the table, movements unhurried yet precise. She gathered the damp linens, folded them with methodical care. When she finally straightened, her posture had subtly transformed. No longer the deferential server, but a woman standing her full height. Would you prefer I bring the dessert menu now? She asked in English, her tone professionally neutral. Or perhaps I could suggest the chef's special baklava with Tahitian vanilla bean ice cream. It's particularly excellent tonight. The prince scoffed, turning to his companions. He switched to classical Arabic, the formal dialect of literature and academia. Why bother with suggestions? Her kind can barely comprehend simple concepts, let alone appreciate the subtleties of fine dining. Intellectual limitations are written into their very essence. Zara took a measured breath, squared her shoulders, and made her decision. In fact, Your Highness, Zara responded in flawless classical Arabic, her pronunciation refined by years of devoted study. The baklava incorporates a rosewater syrup technique from your grandmother's native region, a subtle nod to traditional Najdi preparation methods rarely found outside Saudi Arabia. The transformation at the table was immediate and absolute. Rami froze with his coffee cup suspended midair. The Nazar brothers exchanged stunned glances. Omar's eyebrows rose in undisguised surprise. Prince Faisal's expression shifted from shock to disbelief to carefully controlled anger, all within seconds. You speak Arabic, he stated flatly, switching to English as if to re-establish control. Zara continued in classical Arabic, her vocabulary sophisticated and precise. I do, Your Highness. I'm completing my doctoral research at Columbia University on dialectical variations across the Arabian Peninsula and their impact on diplomatic communications. My focus includes the historical evolution of status indicators in language from pre-Islamic poetry through contemporary business negotiations. The silence deepened. Nearby diners, sensing a dramatic shift, glanced curiously toward the table. My academic emphasis, she continued, voice modulated and respectful despite the undercurrent of justified vindication, has been particularly centered on how language reveals power dynamics when speakers believe themselves linguistically isolated from listeners. Prince Faisal's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He switched to the Saudi Najdi dialect, the regional variation of his family's ancestral homeland. And I suppose you understand this as well? Yes, Your Highness. Zara responded in the same dialect, her accent regionally accurate. My research has required immersion in 7 major Arabic dialects. The Najdi dialect's preservation of classical triliteral root structures fascinates me, particularly in how it maintains linguistic connections to ancient poetic traditions. Rami cleared his throat uncomfortably. The Nasr brothers studied their dessert plates with sudden interest. Only Omar seemed slightly amused, a ghost of appreciation flickering across his features. The prince was merely testing you, Rami attempted, searching for a face-saving explanation. We often encounter Americans who claim linguistic knowledge they don't possess. Zara nodded politely. Of course, academic rigor requires regular testing of assumptions. I've spent the past hour documenting dialectical shifts in your group's conversation, how formal Arabic gave way to regional variations as comfort levels increased, particularly when discussing topics presumed private. She smiled professionally, switching to English. Now about those desserts. Shall I bring the menu, or would you prefer the chef's recommendations? Prince Faisal's knuckles whitened around his water glass. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted, leaving him momentarily speechless, a condition he had likely rarely experienced. Elementary Arabic at best. Prince Faisal recovered, his English clipped. Any tourist can memorize a few phrases. Zara nodded respectfully, then responded in Saudi street dialect, the informal language of marketplaces and everyday conversation. Perhaps Your Highness would be more comfortable discussing local expressions. The evolution of urban vernacular in Riyadh has been particularly dynamic since the economic expansion of the 1970s. Rami winced visibly. The prince's nostrils flared. Enough, he snapped, reverting to English. Bring the dessert menu. As Zara stepped away, hushed conversation erupted behind her. From nearby tables, curious glances followed her movement. The restaurant's atmosphere had subtly transformed, attention now centered on the previously invisible waitress who had somehow unsettled royalty. Mr. Karim intercepted her path, panic evident in his rigid posture. "What happened?" he whispered urgently. "The prince looks. They'd like to see dessert menus," Zara interrupted calmly. "Everything is under control." Confusion battled with anxiety across the maitre d's face. But his expression? Cultural misunderstanding, she offered diplomatically. Resolved now. Across the restaurant, Omar was leaning forward, speaking intently to the prince, who appeared to be listening with reluctant attention. The dynamic at the table had visibly shifted, the easy dominance disrupted, new calculations occurring behind carefully composed expressions. When Zara returned with dessert menus, the atmosphere at the table had congealed into brittle formality. The casual derision had vanished, replaced by something more calculating. So, Prince Faisal addressed her in formal Arabic as she distributed the menus. Columbia University has waitresses studying dialectical variations. How progressive of them. The emphasis carried clear implication. Academic credentials didn't change her current status as server. The attempt to re-establish hierarchy hung palpable in the air. "I'm funding my doctoral research through practical immersion," Zara replied evenly. "Field experience provides insights textbooks cannot." Omar nodded appreciatively. A commendable work ethic. The prince's eyes narrowed slightly at his associate's approval. He tapped the dessert menu, then set it aside without opening it. "Tell me, scholar," he challenged, switching to literary Arabic with deliberately complex grammatical constructions. "Are you familiar with al-Mutanabi's work, or is your study confined to practical phrases for tourism research?" The question was a deliberate intellectual trap. Al-Mutanabi, the celebrated 10th century poet, represented the pinnacle of classical Arabic literature. His work notoriously difficult even for native speakers, filled with layered meanings and complex metaphors. Al-Mutanabi's work formed the cornerstone of my master's thesis, Zara responded, maintaining respectful professionalism despite the transparent test. His innovations in autobiographical voice transformed Arabic poetic tradition. The prince's expression hardened. Anyone can memorize academic talking points. Recite the opening verse of Al-Layla wa al-Faras wa al-Sahra ta'rifuni if you're truly versed in his work. The request wasn't just a challenge. It was a near impossible one. The poem, "The Night the Horses in the Desert Know Me," was among al-Mutanabi's most famous, but contained archaic vocabulary and complex meter. Rami smirked, clearly expecting failure. The Nasser brothers exchanged knowing glances. Zara took a measured breath. Years of pre-dawn study sessions, of recording and re-recording pronunciations, of memorizing classic works by candlelight, had prepared her for precisely this moment. "As you wish, Your Highness," she replied, her composure intact, despite the deliberate public examination. The air in the Azure seemed to still as Zara prepared to respond to the prince's challenge. At nearby tables, conversations slowed as diners sensed the unfolding drama. The restaurant's careful choreography of service momentarily paused, waitstaff finding reasons to linger within earshot, busboys taking extra time clearing adjacent tables. Mr. Kareem hovered anxiously at the periphery, tension evident in his rigid posture. The restaurant director had emerged from his office, standing near the host station with arms crossed, monitoring the situation with mounting concern. Chef Laurent had even appeared from the kitchen, white coat immaculate, ostensibly checking on guest satisfaction, but positioned with clear sight lines to the prince's table. The entire staff is watching. Tariq Nasser murmured to his brother in English, their usual Arabic abandoned. This has become quite the spectacle. Prince Faisal registered the growing audience with tightening jaw muscles. What had begun as casual cruelty towards someone he'd considered inconsequential had transformed into a public contest, with his perceived intellectual superiority now at stake. "Perhaps this is inappropriate," Omar suggested quietly. "We're here for business, not literary examinations." "No," the prince replied sharply. "I'm merely expressing cultural interest in her supposed expertise." His emphasis made clear his skepticism remained intact. From a discreet distance, other restaurant patrons, themselves members of global elite circles, observed with carefully disguised interest. A Parisian fashion designer whispered to her companion. A British banking executive adjusted his position for a better view. A Russian technology investor paused mid-negotiation, attention captured by the unusual tableau. The restaurant's carefully maintained illusion of privacy had dissolved. Whatever happened next would circulate through international business channels by morning, a potential public relations disaster or triumph for all involved. Zara stood straight, hands clasped before her, aware of the watching eyes but focused entirely on the challenge presented. Her academic reputation, personal dignity, and perhaps her professional future hung on her response to what had been intended as an impossible test. The prince gestured impatiently. "We're waiting," he said, confidence evident in his tone. "Impress us with your scholarly achievements." Zara closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, her voice emerged clear and melodious, the classical Arabic flowing with perfect meter and pronunciation. Al-Baytu wa al-Laylu. She continued through the poem's opening verses, her delivery carrying the complex emotional weight of Al-Mutanabi's masterpiece. The ancient words, speaking of night, horses, desert, sword, and pen, filled the Azure's modern opulence with unexpected gravitas. When she finished, silence held the room. Even those who didn't understand Arabic recognized the authenticity of her recitation. Prince Faisal's expression flickered between disbelief and grudging recognition. He hadn't expected actual knowledge, merely the opportunity to expose pretension. An impressive party trick, he conceded coldly, but context and meaning matter more than memorization. What does Al-Mutanabi mean when he writes of "As-sabr murun wa tamuhu mur"? It was another trap, asking her to interpret one of the poet's most ambiguous lines about patience being bitter in taste, yet sweet in consequence. The line reflects Al-Mutanabi's central philosophy about endurance. Zara responded without hesitation. He creates deliberate tension between sabr, meaning patience, and mur, meaning bitterness. A linguistic parallel to life's contradictions. Patience is bitter like its name, yet leads to sweetness, she continued with scholarly precision. The line gains additional meaning when considered alongside his biography, composed during his complex relationship with Saif al-Dawla, when patience under difficult circumstances eventually led to recognition. Omar nodded appreciatively. Remarkable analysis. Rami shifted uncomfortably. The Nasser brothers exchanged glances, their earlier mockery conspicuously absent. Prince Faisal's fingers drummed once on the table, the only outward sign of his frustration. He had created this public test expecting easy victory, not finding himself intellectually matched by someone he dismissed as inferior. You've clearly studied our culture's surface elements, he acknowledged with calculated dismissiveness, though true understanding requires more than memorized texts. It was a weak counter, and everyone at the table recognized it. The ground had shifted irreversibly. In attempting to expose ignorance, the prince had instead revealed his own prejudice and Zara's exceptional expertise. Omar al-Hakim set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. At 72, he had navigated enough diplomatic situations to recognize when intervention was necessary. The prince's increasingly transparent attempts to reassert dominance were becoming uncomfortable for everyone. I find your academic focus fascinating, he addressed Zara directly, effectively cutting across the prince's next challenge. In my experience, linguistic nuance is critical in international negotiations. Just last month in Bahrain, a single mistranslated phrase nearly derailed a billion-dollar infrastructure project. His intervention offered Zara professional recognition, acknowledgement of her expertise rather than her service role. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone at the table. That's precisely what my research examines, Zara responded, grateful for the respite from the prince's interrogation. How subtle dialectical variations create unintended consequences in high-stakes discussions. Omar nodded thoughtfully. I'd be interested in your perspective on the recent Gulf Cooperation Council negotiations. The final communiqué contained phrasing that suggested significant policy shifts to some analysts, while others read it as maintaining status quo. The question wasn't just conversational. It was a genuine request for expert analysis, the kind typically reserved for highly paid consultants or established academics. Prince Faisal shifted in his seat, clearly displeased by his senior associate's legitimization of the server-turned-scholar. Rami studied his watch with sudden interest. The ambiguity was likely deliberate, Zara offered, smoothly transitioning to discussing contemporary geopolitics. The communiqué used classical formal structures but incorporated regionally specific terminology, creating interpretive flexibility for different audiences. Omar's eyes lit with recognition. Exactly what I suspected. Multiple intended readings for domestic versus international consumption. As they continued discussing regional politics, the dynamic transformed. Zara stood beside the table rather than behind it, her posture relaxed yet professional. Omar addressed her as a peer, not a subordinate. The conversation elevated beyond the prince's attempted humiliation to genuine intellectual exchange. From across the restaurant, Mr. Karim watched with visible confusion. The restaurant director approached, whispering urgent questions. Chef Laurent emerged again from the kitchen, hovering nearby with undisguised curiosity. The prince, temporarily sidelined in the conversation he had dominated all evening, signaled impatiently for another coffee. His authority, so casually wielded earlier, now required deliberate reassertion. What interests me, Omar continued, is how linguistic patterns reveal underlying power structures in regional negotiations. Saudi and Emirati delegates consistently employed different rhetorical approaches despite shared interests. The restaurant's regular rhythms had resumed, though nearby tables maintained subtle awareness of the unusual conversation. I've documented that exact phenomenon, Zara responded, her academic passion evident. Emirati negotiators favor future-focused conditional phrases, possibility and potential, while Saudi representatives typically employ present-tense declarative statements, emphasizing existing relationships. The Nasser brothers, initially aligned with the prince's dismissive attitude, now leaned forward with genuine interest. Their technology investments required navigating precisely these cultural nuances. That explains challenges we've encountered in Riyadh versus Abu Dhabi, Tariq noted. Same proposals receive completely different responses. Zara nodded. My research suggests these aren't simply stylistic differences, but reflect deeper cultural frameworks. Traditional Najd rhetoric values declarative certainty, while coastal trading cultures historically emphasized conditional relationships. Prince Faisal, increasingly marginalized in the conversation about his own culture, attempted to reclaim authority. These are simplistic generalizations. Modern diplomatic language transcends such regional patterns. With respect, Your Highness, Zara countered politely. Data suggests otherwise. Even in your own speaking pattern tonight, you've demonstrated classic Najd rhetorical structures, particularly in authoritative declarations followed by supporting evidence. Her observation wasn't confrontational, but academic, a researcher noting linguistic patterns rather than a server challenging authority. Omar chuckled appreciatively. She's analyzed your speech patterns while serving dinner. Remarkable multitasking. The implications for international business are significant, Salim Nasser added, fully engaged now. We're expanding into American markets next quarter and anticipating considerable communication challenges. Cultural integration requires linguistic awareness, Zara agreed. My dissertation includes case studies of failed business ventures where language misalignment preceded financial collapse. As the conversation expanded to include practical business applications of her research, Zara's role had transformed completely. She stood not as server, but as consultant. Her expertise sought rather than her service demanded. The prince, witnessing his companion's growing respect for someone he'd casually demeaned, sipped his coffee in increasingly strained silence. Would you elaborate on the application of your research to technology sector expansions? Tariq asked, retrieving a small notebook from his jacket pocket. We've encountered persistent communication barriers despite employing top translators. Prince Faisal's attempt to interject a dismissive comment about academic theories versus practical experience went unacknowledged as Zara addressed the question with specific examples from Gulf Tech ventures. Translation alone is insufficient, she explained. Cultural frameworks determine how innovation is perceived. In my research comparing pitches across regional markets, we should discuss our dinner plans. The prince interrupted, voice hardened with authority. We have reservations at the Azure Lounge for drinks afterward. The attempted redirect fell flat. Omar checked his watch and shrugged. Perhaps you younger men should go ahead. I find this conversation more valuable than another evening of cocktails. Rami, still aligned with the prince, nodded obediently. Of course, we should maintain our schedule. But the Nasser brothers hesitated, clearly torn between established hierarchy and unexpected intellectual opportunity. Perhaps another 15 minutes, Salim suggested cautiously. Ms. Jordan's insights are directly relevant to our expansion strategy. The prince's jaw tightened as he recognized his diminished control. The companions who had laughed at his mockery now listened attentively to the very person he'd degraded. Power had shifted subtly but unmistakably, leaving him peripheral to a conversation centered at his own table. As the intellectual exchange continued, other diners at the Azure completed their meals and departed. The restaurant's typical turnover slowed around the prince's table. Servers hesitant to interrupt the unconventional scene of a waitress engaged in scholarly discussion with elite businessmen. Omar glanced at his watch, then made a decision. He retrieved a sleek business card case from his jacket pocket, platinum with subtle etching, a status symbol in itself. Miss Jordan, he said, extracting a card and placing it deliberately on the table. Your analysis aligns precisely with challenges my company has encountered in cross-cultural negotiations. We retain consultants to bridge these gaps, but few possess your combination of academic foundation and practical cultural immersion. The card, embossed with the logo of Al Hakim International Holdings, gleamed under the restaurant's lighting. Its presentation wasn't merely a networking gesture, but a formal acknowledgement of professional value. I would be interested in discussing how your research might benefit our operations, Omar continued, perhaps as an advisory consultant while you complete your doctorate. The offer hung in the air, unexpected professional recognition materializing from what had begun as deliberate humiliation. Around the table, reactions varied visibly. The Nasr brothers calculating potential competitive advantages, Rami maintaining diplomatic neutrality, Prince Faisal barely concealing his displeasure. "I'm honored by your interest," Zara responded professionally, not reaching for the card prematurely. "My research specifically addresses communication failures in high-stakes international ventures. Precisely what multinational corporations require, but rarely find," Omar agreed. "Academic expertise combined with practical cultural fluency." He turned to include his companions. "Consider how often translation issues have complicated our joint ventures. Technical accuracy without cultural context creates persistent misalignments." Tariq nodded. Last quarter's Singapore negotiation nearly collapsed over precisely such misunderstandings. "My team would provide your contact information to Miss Jordan?" Omar continued smoothly. "Perhaps an initial consultation when your schedule permits." With that simple statement, he transformed what might have been dismissed as impulse into formal business procedure, cementing Zara's transition from server to recognized expert. Prince Faisal, watching his longtime associate extend professional recognition to someone he demeaned for hours, maintained rigid composure despite his evident displeasure at this final reversal. Mr. Karim had maintained discreet surveillance throughout the evening's unexpected developments. Initially hovering close with anxiety over potential complaints, he'd gradually retreated as the table's dynamic transformed from antagonism to engaged discussion. Now witnessing Omar's business card presentation, he approached with recalibrated perception. "I apologize for the interruption." He addressed the table with practiced deference. "Is everything satisfactory with your experience this evening?" His question carried dual purpose: professional courtesy and information gathering about the unusual situation unfolding under his supervision. Omar nodded appreciatively. "More than satisfactory. Your establishment has provided not only excellent cuisine but unexpected intellectual stimulation." He gestured toward Zara. "You have quite the academic talent on your staff." Mr. Karim blinked, processing this information against his previous understanding of his employee. "Indeed," he managed, glancing between Zara and the business card still resting on the table. "Ms. Jordan has been sharing fascinating insights from her Columbia University doctoral research," Omar continued, "particularly relevant to our business interests in American markets." The restaurant manager's expression shifted subtly as pieces connected. The quiet, efficient server who always arrived early to review Arabic menu pronunciations, the notebook she maintained during breaks, the polite questions about regional dialects among guests. "I see," he said, reassessing months of interactions in seconds. "Ms. Jordan has been an exemplary team member." Prince Faisal, seizing opportunity to reassert influence, interjected coolly, though perhaps her academic pursuits have divided her professional attention. The implied criticism hung briefly before Omar countered. On the contrary, her practical experience here clearly enhances her research, a commendable dedication to comprehensive understanding. The exchange wasn't lost on Mr. Kareem, whose career had been built on reading power dynamics among wealthy patrons. He made a rapid calculation regarding which opinion carried greater weight. The Azure has always valued staff with diverse talents, he offered diplomatically. Perhaps we should consider how Miss Jordan's expertise might enhance our guest experience program. It was a public acknowledgement of value, small but significant in the hierarchical world of luxury hospitality. The manager, who had earlier prioritized the prince's comfort above employee dignity, now recognized previously invisible professional worth. Around the restaurant, other staff members observed the interaction with undisguised interest. The kitchen team, led by Chef Laurent, had created excuses to emerge from their domain, watching their colleagues' transformation from dismissed server to recognized expert. The evening's final desserts arrived, delivered by another server as Zara remained engaged in discussion, marking the unconventional completion of a service that had begun with deliberate humiliation and concluded with unexpected professional recognition. Months later, Zara stood at the entrance of the Azure, no longer in server's attire but dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. The restaurant had become a familiar meeting point for her new professional reality. Dr. Jordan. Mr. Kareem greeted her warmly, using the title she'd earned after successfully defending her dissertation the previous month. Your regular table is prepared. Mr. Al-Hakim mentioned he might be a few minutes delayed. The transformation extended beyond clothing and title. As Senior Cultural Communications Consultant for Al-Hakim International Holdings, Zara now advised on multilingual negotiations across 3 continents. Her doctoral research, fully funded through Omar's educational foundation, had been published to academic acclaim. Chef Laurent emerged briefly from the kitchen, exchanging a friendly nod. Several servers, former colleagues, smiled in recognition as she passed. The Azure's staff had witnessed her journey from its uncomfortable beginning to improbable resolution. The Nasser brothers had engaged her services separately for their technology expansion, creating competition for her expertise that had doubled her initial consulting rate. Even Rami had eventually requested her review of several diplomatic translations for the prince's foundation, though Prince Faisal himself maintained conspicuous distance. As she settled at her table, the same one where humiliation had transformed to opportunity, Zara opened her leather portfolio containing the next quarter's consulting contracts, remembering how differently she had stood in this same space just months before. The evening at the Azure had catalyzed ripple effects beyond Zara's personal trajectory. Mr. Kareem had implemented staff skills assessments, discovering a Lebanese dishwasher with engineering expertise, a Filipino hostess with finance credentials, and a Russian busboy with advanced mathematics training. The restaurant now actively promoted internal talent development, creating pathways from service roles to specialized positions within the hotel's international operations. Omar had initiated industry discussions about hidden talent recognition across his corporate holdings, challenging assumptions about capability based on visible roles. The Nasser brothers had followed suit in their technology ventures, creating university partnership programs specifically targeting overlooked potential. For Zara, the experience had refined her research focus to practical applications. How organizations systematically overlook multilingual talent and cultural expertise among employees considered auxiliary to core operations. Her story, carefully anonymized but powerfully narrated, had become a case study in business schools and diversity initiatives across industries. The lesson crystallized not in dramatic confrontation, but quiet recognition. Expertise exists in unexpected places, often hidden behind uniforms and preconceptions, waiting only for the opportunity to emerge. The question it raises lingers beyond the narrative. Whose capabilities remain unseen in your organization? What talents are you overlooking in the people you encounter daily? Hidden talent exists everywhere, often concealed behind uniforms and assumptions, waiting for the chance to shine. If this story moved you, hit like now and follow PAP Stories for more powerful narratives that will change how you see the world around.